I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest, first time guest, somehow, some way. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It is Brooks Austin, who covers all things Georgia for Sports Illustrated, which Georgia fans know very, very well. Brooks, by the time that people are listening to this, it will be either G Day Eve on Friday, or it will be, maybe somebody's listening to this driving on their way to G Day. What's the appropriate level of excitement for a spring game when you're a team like Georgia that has legit national title aspirations?
If you're a team that's 3 points away from contending for a third national title last year, I would imagine you're probably pretty excited to get this one up and going, right? I was very intrigued last year after a two-peat to see what it kind of looked like on G-Day and what it kind of looked like during spring, scrimmages and whatnot. But they had half of the stadium kind of shut down for renovations last year, so we didn't really get that gauge. It was like a 50% stadium full, but they only allowed like 60% of the stadium to be even be set in. So I'm very intrigued, like most, to kind of see where things are at and what kind of the temperature of the fan base is. I always say spring practice is a great litmus test for kind of the energy and the environment around the off-season kind of fan base, if you will. But from a strictly like numbers and analytics perspective, Georgia fans have kind of been showing up this spring like they typically do. It hasn't been any what do you call it, complacency going around in this fan base. That 3-point loss to Alabama, I think, kind of inhibited that from happening this offseason.
I think last offseason, this time of year, the intrigue is all about Carson Beck. What does he look like?
Yeah.
A little birdie told me that he's put on 20 pounds of muscle, or at least 20 pounds of good weight. And if you look at some of the images that have come out from Georgia practices, you can kind of see that already. Like, you definitely see it in kind of, his arms and stuff like that, which make of what you will. Do you think there's some focus on him, if that is the case? Do you think there's some focus on him gaining more weight? Because, look, at any level of football that he plays at after this, he's going to be sacked more than 11 times in a season. Yeah. Or does he want to become more of a force with his body as a runner? Like, is that part of it? Like, or is it maybe just a little bit of both?
I think it's just some general maturation going on for Carson. I'll be honest, I haven't heard of any drastic weight gain, so that was kind of news to me. 20 pounds is a lot. This is a football player who last year was 6'4", 225. So if you told me he's rolling around at 245, I don't even know if I like that. You know what I mean? I don't even know if I like him being that big. But from a skill set standpoint, you would imagine there's been some emphasis on becoming a better athlete, right? I think that's the one kind of area of his game that people will point to and say, well, he's not quite elite there, right? He's an elite processor. He has elite arm talent. He has elite arm strength. He has elite pocket management, all that good stuff. He can see the field correctly. He has elite recall. Kirby Smart's talked about that a lot. But the one area of kind of concern, if you will, around him is like, hey, he's not a supreme athlete, right? I think he might go to the combine and run like 4.85. That's not, nowadays in the NFL, you got to be like sub 4.75 to be a threat, or at least to be able to extend plays with your legs, which we've found nowadays as pass rushers get better and better and better. Your win rates at the pass rushing positions are much higher than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And those win rates are at a much quicker pace, right? They're getting on you a lot faster. So you got to be able to make guys miss and extend plays with your legs while continue to be able to make plays downfield. If there has been weight gain, I would imagine it's been about that. Hey, can we maximize the athletic traits that the Lord has given us? I think that's the priority for Carson as an athlete moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, even Will Levis, now that I think about it, is like 232, and that guy is absolutely yoked. So you're right, like 240 would be huge. Probably not getting to that level, but if he had put on some muscle, to improve in those areas, certainly wouldn't be a surprise. My eyes told me last year that Mike Bobo eventually adapted those concepts that Todd Monken brought to this Georgia offense in the 2020s. And I was a massive Bobo skeptic to start. And by the end of the year, I found myself banging the drum for him. Going into this year, I think he can be a reason why Georgia wins a national championship and not a reason why they don't. You study this stuff even more in depth than I do, so I trust your opinion, obviously. What was your takeaway watching the maturation of Bobo in this offense, adapting those Monken concepts?
Yeah, I think there were going to be some major changes from Monken's last year at Georgia in 2022 to 2023 anyways. I think even if Monken were there, they would have looked, felt, smelt different, right? No Darnell Washington, no Stetson Bennett. and you're going to change that out with Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp. Not necessarily a drop-off. It's a change in style, right, from 2022 to 2023. And then, by the way, Bobo, Bowers is going to be out for 3 games and limited for the rest of the season, even when he comes back. So that was going to feel totally different. And then you look at Stetson Bennett, right? Stetson Bennett was a manipulation of the launch point type quarterback, meaning they weren't going to leave him in one standard drop back set. They weren't going to 3-step, 5-step him all day long. They were going to 3-step him, roll right, 3-step, heavy play action boot, right? That was the style of offense they played with Monken and with Bennett, and that was going to feel and look totally different no matter what, despite the coordinator change. But, yeah, man, I'm with you. I think, initially, I don't know what it is about him. I really don't. I don't know what it is about Mike Bobo. I think it's 3rd and 15 play calls from 2007 that have people thinking that this guy's not very good. But when you look at Bobo's history, and we preached this over and over again last offseason, look at this dude's history. He goes everywhere he goes, and he puts up 38-plus points. He puts up 40-plus points, except for that 1 year at Auburn and that 1 year at South Carolina, which Luke Doty is your quarterback, baby. I don't know if you're going to put 40 points up no matter who you had at the quarterback position or at the offensive coordinator position. So I think the Bobo slander has always gotten a little bit overblown. But, there are Georgia fans that will look at the Alabama game and they will point directly to him and they will say, well, he can't win the big one. He can't go out there and score points against great defenses. And I would point to something different. I would point to the fact that, Bowers was about 75, 80% in that football game. Ladd McConkey was not a version of himself. Oh, by the way, your first-round right tackle kind of tapped his helmet 2 series into the football game, and Amarius Mims is now out. So there was a lot going on in that football game, on top of the fact that the other guy on the other sideline, Nick Saban, made one of the greatest coaching adjustments defensively in one drive that I've ever seen. They were playing a 5-down front against Georgia. Georgia was pounding them in the flats, just getting the ball out really quickly. A lot of yak yardage after the play because corners are playing off. One safety in the middle of the field. It's like, hey, we're gonna keep everything in front. Well, they walked that ball down the field, and then Nick Saban was like, 4-2-5, play a 4 down front. We'll live and die, and we'll survive against the run. But we are not going to let these guys throw the football against us today, and that's exactly what happened. So sometimes it's easy to say my coordinator got beat as opposed to saying their coordinator beat me. Does that make sense? And in that football game, the one loss last year, I would say Bama's coaching staff did a much better job than you did a bad one as a football staff.
What's been your takeaway from this eventful start to Travis Etienne at Georgia? Or Trevor Etienne, my bad. I never do that. I pride myself on not doing that. But Trevor Etienne, as a little brother, I can't get that one wrong.
Yeah, I think he's been a great, obviously he had some off the field, issues this spring, but he's been a great addition by differentiation, right? He's a total different style of back than what they have available this spring, particularly. Like Rod Robinson's a 242-pound running back at like 8% body fat. He's built like a brick shit house. Where you look over at Trevor Etienne, and Trevor Etienne standing next to Roderick, they look like they play 2 totally different sports, right? Trevor is, maybe 5'11", maybe 190 pounds, maybe, right? But super elite from a make you miss standpoint. The first defender will never or rarely ever bring Trevor Etienne down. So I think it's been a tremendous addition to the room from a standpoint of they didn't have anything that looked like him. Even when Branson Robinson gets back, that's a 230-pound running back, man. That's a guy that Georgia fans will tell you look like Nick Chubb, even though I think he looks more like Maurice Jones-Drew, right? One of these super compact football players that has the ability to both make you miss, stick his foot in the ground, and run over you, right? All 3 kind of different things in the package of Branson Robinson, whereas, Roderick is thunder. Roderick is the definition of thunder in a running back. You got to find the lightning. They have not had the lightning in that running back room since DeAndre Swift left. I would say Kenny McIntosh provided a little bit of it, but Kenny McIntosh wasn't 100% healthy during his time period at Georgia ever, I don't believe. And I don't think he's been 100% healthy in the league either. So this is a very different back coming to Georgia that they haven't had, I would say, in maybe like 2 or 3 years on the roster.
It's kind of crazy to think that Georgia, for all the great things that they've done in the ground game, they haven't had that all SEC back in 5 years since DeAndre Swift. Now, obviously, part of that is because when he's got that depth, it's a little bit tougher to stand out individually. It's different than what Mizzou tries to do, of course, and they can rely on that because they have to if you're playing a 14, 15 game season or something like that. But do you think that Trevor Etienne breaks that drought and ends up being an all SEC guy at season's end? Or because of Rod Robinson, a guy that our guy Aaron Murray is saying he's got some Todd Gurley in him, do you think that he is maybe the guy that can like kind of prevent that from happening and maybe limit Trevor Etienne's upside?
I mean, you could say they haven't had an all SEC back since DeAndre Swift because of workload and because they don't feature one back or whatever. They haven't had one drafted like that since DeAndre Swift. So the NFL doesn't look at their room and says, hey, they have an elite guy, right? Like Dejon Edwards is going to be a 5th to 7th round draft pick. The same could be said for Kendall Milton this year. Kenny McIntosh was a 6th round draft pick last year, 7th round draft pick last year. So they haven't had the draft equity placed at this position since DeAndre. So is this year the year that changes? I certainly believe so. But, they feel way better about their running back room right now than they did this time last year or even in September last year. Midway through the very beginning of the season last year, Cash Jones, a former walk-on, a current walk-on, was like the 2 or the 3 deep in this roster because Dejon was banged up, Kendall was banged up, and then you look up at your roster and you're like, well, daggum, we're gonna start a freshman to start the year, and we got a walk-on that's backing him up. So they are in a totally different, place at the running back room this year. And by the way, I think the most promising evaluation for me coming out of high school recently is Nate Frazier, the running back out of Mater Dei. I think he's going to be really, really good. They think he's going to be really, really good. He's a guy that's like 10-5 in the track, on track, like in the 100, and he's a dude that's going to come to Georgia really, really fresh. He has not been featured as the primary back at a school like Mater Dei. He's been an addition to the room. They think he's going to be an addition to the room year one right now at the University of Georgia when he gets there this summer. So I'm super bullish on the room, as are they.
And on top of all that, the possibility of Dylan Bell sneaking back there and getting some carries every once in a while. I love when he, the ways that he was used, and hopefully that versatility is still there, even if the running back depth is there in ways that it wasn't last year. You're a good person to talk about this guy but Brock Vandagriff, he comes into this season as one of the most intriguing players in the SEC, and I spent some time with him in Lexington and got to know a little bit more about him, about his story, kind of what fuels him and all those things. But you've watched this guy for 3 years, and that doesn't even include the recruiting stuff in the state of Georgia, all that. Is he ready to be one of the better starting quarterbacks in this league?
I think that's a 2-year plan up at Kentucky. If you sat down with him, Connor, so like he would have waited his turn at Georgia. I truly believe that had there been 2 years of eligibility remaining on his time chart, if you will, at the position. So they know the deal. They know he's going to need 2 years of starting. And when I say they, I'm talking about the Vandagriff camp, if you will. It sounds like when you talk to Brock, I read that article that you did. First of all, tremendous interview, by the way. He's not Will Levis from a physical looking standpoint. I mean, he is big. Don't get me wrong. He's 6'3", he's 230 pounds ish. He's cut up. He's a great power cleaner. He was a great athlete coming out of high school. He's a better runner than Will Levis ever dreamed of being. I will tell you that right now. When I watched Will Levis run the football, I held my breath waiting for the dude to get shattered or turn the football over. I don't think that's going to be the case with Vandagriff. I also think there's going to be some pocket maturation that needs to happen, right? There's going to be times when Kentucky fans watch Brock Vandagriff play on Saturdays, and you're going to be like, ooh, I felt like you bailed out of that pocket a little bit earlier. The more and more that shows progression, the more and more you see maturation in that process, you're going to see an elite football player. You're going to see an elite quarterback. One thing I will tell you about Brock's time at Georgia, there were kind of 2 different days that we would hear about, right? Or 2 different throws even within the same day that you would hear about. You would hear about the times where Brock maybe put a ball at risk or had a ball intercepted during practice where everyone in the building can clearly look at it and say, damn, son, you just didn't see that. Like, you didn't see where that guy was. You didn't see where the play was developing. You didn't see that this was the progression. You didn't see that. And then there's the very next play or 5 plays later where that dude throws a football that has everybody in the building going, God dang, whoa, did you see that go by? Like he makes plays like that, and he will make plays like that on Saturdays. The maturation point for him, the is he going to be great point for him is a melding of those two things where we start to see the field at a much higher rate and a much better rate. And also, we continue to be this physical freak that has NFL scouts walking through and tabbing him, man. They have been tabbing this guy since he was a freshman because he has an ability to throw the football that only like 7 or 8 guys in this world have. He has that type of velocity, that type of RPM on that right arm.
Let's talk Kirby. He's clearly the unquestioned top dog in the sport now that Saban has retired. But there's been talk about, how much this era of the sport could wear on him. And let's be honest, like a lot of it is speculation. You see him more regularly than all of us do. Do you get that sense at all? Or is this just what natural aging looks like for a man in his late 40s in a high stress job?
Bro, he's aged like a president, hasn't he?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's been quick. I'll be honest. If it continues like this, I don't see anybody lasting until they're in their 60s coaching this sport, man. Like I just don't. It is a 365-day-a-year job, and people will say, well, he makes $12 million a year. He makes $11 million a year. Shut up and do your job. Like, yeah, okay. Like that's fine. I think for me, the approach at the University of Georgia, from all accounts, with the transfer portal and NIL becoming a major thing, and it's stressing a lot of these guys, they have seemingly approached this as we just got to get to regulation. We just got to get to some type of Super League or some type of mass passing of a bill, or maybe Congress will save us or something, because what they're not going to do is they're not going to approach this willy-nilly. They're not going to be out here saying, oh, the game is we got to go out and raise as much funds and pay as much as we possibly can to keep a great roster. Great. We'll just do that. We'll just bend to all of our moral compasses around here, right? Which at Georgia, they kind of refuse to pay high school players. They don't want to do this. And Kirby has even been very adamant about this in front of microphones, in front of cameras. I am not about giving $250,000 to an 18-year-old kid. Come to my program. Prove that you are great. Prove that you will be able to earn this type of money. And then we will find a way to get it to you, right? I don't think there's any doubt that Georgia football players right now are compensated well. I think across the sport, if you have a top 3 roster, guess what, fans? It's coming out of your pocket. Like, they are paying those players. That's the way this sport is now working. But there has been a reluctancy to be the highest bidder on the recruiting trail. And the first 2 years of NIL, Georgia could go in there and they could say, hey, I got a power G on my chest. We just put 17 guys in the draft. We got another 12 coming up next year. We're going to win 2 national titles, all that good stuff. You're going to take a pay cut coming here because of what the upside is, right? We are the new Bama. We are the new, standard in college football. So, yeah, we don't have to pay as much as others. That gap has shrunk, Connor. Like, kids are not listening to that as much as they were 24 months ago. Now it has become fair market value. Like, we're not going to take some massive pay cut to come play for you because we can go elsewhere, and we will take we will take that money elsewhere. And they haven't failed to recruit outside the top 3 yet since NIL has been around. But if you ask Georgia fans right now, they don't feel comfortable, right? They have 5 commits in the 2025 class in the middle of April right now. Like, I think they're outside the top 15 in any consensus recruiting rankings that you look at. Is Kirby Smart the greatest closer on the recruiting trail in the sport of college football right now? 100%. Does he have to close with more than just his mouth and a little bit of his pocketbook moving forward? Yeah. Like, that's the reality of where we're at right now.
If he wins the title this year, though, before all that other stuff, sets in, and who knows what the sport looks like 3-4 years from now, and if he's able to turn over a roster in the same way that he's been able to. But if he wins a title this year, he'll have a title in 3 of 4, which that list is unbelievably exclusive. Saban, Osborne, that's it. Those are the only coaches who have done that the last 70 years. Not even Bear Bryant did that. And I'm sure that some people will disagree with this because they want to tell me about football in a pre-integration world. That's on them, not on me. But I think if Kirby wins a title this year to get to 3 of 4, He's on my Mount Rushmore of best coaches ever because he
Oh yeah.
passes Paterno, he passes Bowden, he passes Carroll, he passes Dabo for rings. He'd be tied with Switzer, he'd be tied with Urban. But you know what? Tie goes to the guy who did it in the portal NIL era. Probably Saban, Bear, Osborne, Kirby would be my Mount Rushmore if Kirby wins a title this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Joe Pa compiler.
Some would say. Some would say.
Some would say. No, I'm with you. I think the discussion of nowadays. I like that you turned it into a Mount Rushmore but that's not what it's going to be. If he wins this year, it's going to be a GOAT versus GOAT discussion, right? It's going to be Saban versus Smart. Who is better? And I compared it to the Mahomes versus Brady discussion in NFL football, right? Like Mahomes is going to go on to have the greatest statistical career of any quarterback. I think that everybody knows that, right? Hell, he might win more Super Bowls than Tom Brady when all is said and done. But that head-to-head record is what it is. Those two guys played each other. Those two guys went up against each other. Those guys competed for a Super Bowl against one another, right? The same is going to be said about Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. You are 1-4. Like that's just what it is. You are 1-4 against that cat. Hell, I think it might have been 1-5. You are 1-5 against that cat, and you will always be 1-5 against that dude, and that will be held. And guess what? I think Kirby looks at it that way too, because when he was asked about Nick Saban retiring, he was like, "Man, I was kind of upset. Like, not only is we losing a great coach, but I wanted to continue to compete against that guy. I wanted to continue to try to beat him." Because he didn't have a great success record against him, and to be quite honest, nobody did.
I think it changed with the SEC championship this past year. I think that entire conversation when Saban's got that 5-1 advantage on you, like that's just a little bit of a different ball game. But yeah, I mean Kirby's legacy, 3 out of 4 would be unbelievably special. Last one for you: if Georgia doesn't win a title this year, who will be the team responsible for that? And maybe let's exclude Ohio State because that feels like such an obvious choice at this stage of the game. But it's even tough to pick out a team in the regular season now with the 12-team playoff and all that. Who is the first other team that kind of comes to mind that could be standing there maybe in a playoff setting that you'd look at and be like, I don't know. I think they can take a punch from Georgia and they could be a team that could prevent them.
I mean, to be honest with you, there's a good chance that they see Texas twice this year, like a really, really good chance. One time in Austin, and then probably you would imagine in a college football playoff, and they're gonna right. I mean, they're gonna have to beat Texas at some point. I would imagine. I think that's the team for me. I think DeBoer at Alabama, they have a lot of moving parts that they got to get figured out, particularly the quarterback. Like, I don't know how to say it. Jalen Miller is a great football player. He is not what Kalen DeBoer has ever prioritized at the position. And you could tell me that he's a great coordinator and that he's going to figure out a way to maximize his skill sets. And I truly believe that. But we watched for 2 transfer quarterback cycles. We watched what Kalen DeBoer prioritizes at that position, and it is not physical attributes, right? Like Michael Penix went out and did what he did at the pro day, and that's great. And he is a supreme athlete. He does not play the position like that. He plays the position like a pocket manager. He plays the position like a distributor of the football, right? They got Michael Penix. They had an opportunity to go get another transfer quarterback, and he took Will Rogers. Will Rogers is the antithesis of Jalen Milroe, like the complete polar opposite. So I want to see what Alabama does. By the way, like, they have a first-time, like, real coordinator, right? I mean, that's one thing there that they got to figure out as well. I believe Kalen DeBoer is going to be great at Alabama. I don't know if it's immediate, like, hey, push for a national title year one. So we're going to have to see from that as well. Obviously, everybody looks at Ole Miss. That game is so far down the schedule for Georgia and Ole Miss. I have no earthly idea what Lane Kiffin's football team is going to look like in November. And I don't think Lane Kiffin knows what Lane Kiffin's football team is going to look like in November. Are they 8-2 and everybody's kind of just, all those mercenaries have just been like, hey, our mercenary mission is over. We're good. We're just going to hang out. Or are they 11-1 or are they 10-1 and they have to win out to continue their mercenary mission? I don't know. So that's kind of hard for me. But when I just circle this conference and I look at it, Texas is the football team that, from a line of scrimmage base standpoint, has built that roster the way they're supposed to. They've got great quarterback play as well, and a great weapon at the running back position as well with Baxter. So hey, I'm bullish on Texas, but I think it's Georgia's kind of conference to handle. But they have a really, really tough schedule this year, man.
That was the correct answer. You actually did know that was, there was like a right or wrong, but that Texas was indeed the correct answer that I was looking for. So congrats to you. You passed the test. Brooks, this was great, man. We're going to have to do this again during the regular season. Enjoy G-Day, and we'll do this again soon.
No doubt, brother. We'll talk to you soon.